From the University of Stefan Mare, from Romania. And I'm very happy that he agreed to participate in a project Collegium Carpathicum, which is supported by International Visegrad Fund. Today we have a very interesting lecture which is connected with very unusual topic about lights and shadows of Polish exile in Romania in 1939-1944. We can say that the topics which are connected with war and wartime always are difficult, and it's very hard to be a specialist in this sphere. So we know that Professor Radu Bruja, one of the best specialists from Romania and from the University Stefan Mare. And I think that this lecture will open to all of us new borders and new understanding of this topic, the topic of Polish exile, especially in Romania. Dear Professor, we welcome you again. The lecture is recording and also translating on YouTube channel. And this lecture will be available also on YouTube page of University of Warsaw. So I'm warmly welcome you, and with great pleasure, I give you a word.
I'm not just the best specialist of these topics. Maybe in my home, it's the best. I'm the best of others. But for the part, I want to tell you a short story. In September 1993, the Carta Foundation in Warsaw launched a call to the Romanian newspaper to identify people who had known Polish refugees during the World War II. More than 100 people answered this call or sent letters to the Polish embassy in Bucharest. 2 years later, in 1995, Romanian Days was organized at the Carta Center in Warsaw, and the documentary film produced by the second program of Polish television was presented. 20 people met at the Carta Center due to this so-called action meeting over the years. In September 2009, at the Dom Spotkania w Historia, the House of Meeting with History in Warsaw, was launched an album, Rumuński Azyl Losy Polaków, 1939-1945, with the original images of Polish exile in Romania from the archives of the Institute of National Memory of Poland and the private collection. We were a story of great sympathies, the echoes of the memory to those whose destiny made him meet the Poles and the Romanian in such dramatic circumstances. My presentation is addressed to both today and yesterday. My lesson was prepared for 2 hours at the University of Warsaw. Because the times does not allow us, I will present it only a first part. I hope that the second part, more dramatic part, will not wait 15 or 70 years like meeting between the Poles and Romanians who met in autumn of 1939 and then in 1995. Therefore, the contents, it's a short prologue, the frontiers, geography of asylum, internment, the escape of Poland, and the problem about the Polish treasury, and some aspects about daily life and association of Polish schools in Romania during the World War II. I hope that the other aspects will be able to present in a future lecture about the Romanian World War II and the situation of Poles. First, let me read a short prologue. The events of September 1939 found Romania in a very delicate situation. The balancing policy of the King Charles II's authoritarian regime required a friendly relationship with Nazi Germany, the only power that seemed capable of supporting Romania against the claim of the Soviet Union. On the other hand, the traditional alliance with England and France, and especially the friendship treaty with Poland, required cooperation with them against Germany. Romania opted, following the Crown Council of September 6, for, I quote, strict observance of the rules of neutrality. Nevertheless, the sympathy of the Romanians has shifted from the beginning to the cause of the Poles, especially after Poland was attacked by the Soviet Union. Thus, Romania's neutrality was a benevolent one for Poland, or, as has been called, an anti-German differentiated one. In this presentation, we only aim to discuss some issue of the Polish exodus, emphasizing a number of positive and negative aspects of refugees' life. On the one hand, by the hospitable attitude of the friendship manifestation that have been tied between the Romanians and the Poles. On the other hand, by the umbrellas referring to the inherent difficulties on which such an episode has generated, especially because of international tensions. Some aspects about the crossing the border, Wrzesnia, September 1939. The first Polish refugees arrived in Romania as early as September 12, when several aircrafts of Polish company LOT landing in Chernivtsi. Because my lesson had to be held in front of students at the Warsaw University, I will use the Polish version, Czerniowce. It's according to an idea of the Belgian essayist Gerd van Istandel, who said about the town where world language has no singular. Czerniowce, Czernivtsi, Czernowitz, Czernowitz. I prefer the Polish version. On the night of 13 and 14 September, the Polish authorities ordered the evacuation to the border of Romania in the Kosów-Kuti region, and on the morning of September 14, the Polish authorities and the train carrying the state treasury of Poland were in Czerniowce. General Gabriel Marinescu, government mandated, and Vasile Grigorcea, the Romanian ambassador, connected Joseph Beck, the Polish foreign policy representative. The opening of Romania's border to receive civilian, military, and state authorities, according by the Polish National Treasury, has been dissatisfied with Berlin. As a result of pressure made by the head of the German legation in Bucharest, Wilhelm Fabricius, and the Romanian foreign minister Grigore Gafencu, had to ask the members of Polish government to refrain from any political activity, forbidding even the use of the radio of the phone with the foreign. I have to give some explanation. According to the pattern of this time, embassies were opening only between the great powers. Between these on the small or medium state, the diplomatic representation is achieved through delegation. On May 1938, the diplomatic mission in Bucharest and Warsaw was raised to embassy level, exceeding the standards of the time. Until September 18, the President of the Republic of Poland, Ignacy Mościcki, Marshal Edward Rudź-Śmigły, and the Polish Army General Staff, General Felicjan Słatkowski, and others arrived in Czerniowce. From Czerniowce, Ignacy Moszczycki addressed a message to the Polish refugees, declaring that he was transferring, I quote, the headquarters of the presidency of the Republic and of the highest authorities of the state to a residence where there are conditions and possibility to watch for the interest of the Republic. The statement puts the Romanian authorities in a delicate situation because, according to the rules of neutrality, Romania could not accept that the Polish government would take political action on its territory. This out-of-pocket situation of the Poles in the second half of September 1939 was relatively improved by the gesture of the authorities in Bucharest, headed by Prime Minister Armand Călinescu. Victim of the same confrontation, Armand Călinescu, loyal adept of the alliance with England and France, has generously opened the border for Polish refugees. The Prime Minister of Romania said that he wants, I quote from Călinescu, all the Poles who will come from here to the Allies to continue the struggle for freedom to remember me as a true friend. Unfortunately, Călinescu was assassinated on 21 September in Bucharest by Iron Guards members under direct leadership of Horea Sima. Horea Sima is the chief of the legionary movement. It seemed that the action was carried out with German approval or assistance. In today, the embassy of Romania, in Warsaw, it's on a street called Armand Călinescu. The geography of asylum. Poles entered in Romania at Huti to Vișnița, or Șniatin to Černiovce, or Zaleszczycki to Černiovce. From Černiovce, they were directed to southern of the country, far from the border with the Soviet Union. They flew to routes through Botoșani to Iași and Focșani, and Černiovce, Suceava, Bacău, Focșani. Initially, it was decided that the refugees Poles would be settled in the northern Dobroja, in the Babadag-Tulcea area. The large number of refugees forces that the Romanian authorities to change the destination because Dobroja was not far away from Soviet Union. In area near the old river at Călimanești, Rânicu Vâlcea, Govora, Ocnele Mari, Slatina, Caracal, or in Târgoviște, Comișani in the Dâmbovița County, or in Târgu Jiu near the Oltenia or Craiova. The Poles were asked by disciplined are subject to the Romanian authority. As regards the Poles who were found without identity papers issued by the Romanian authorities or without a residence permit, a disciplinary camp set up in Făgăraș Citadel. As regards those found in Bucharest or in Prahova region, Prahova County, they were sent up to the center of Giurgiu, it's here, Oltenița, and Turnu Măgurele and Corabia near the Danube River. They are not mentioned on this map. Over September and October 1979, the branches of National Red Cross Society opened canteens and first aid points in railways, terminals, and stops over points, distribute food, collected clothes, and ensured conveyance of mail by the International Committee of Red Cross. A special bureau for Polish refugees was opened in Bucharest, chaired by Princess Irina Sturza, Vice President of National Red Cross Society in Romania. Until October 15, the Red Cross Committee has been organized in each country in the southern part of Romania. Until October 15, the nominal register had been to conclude and the money entitlement allocated to the refugees were established. The prefecture was also responsible for the health of the refugees as well as for the food to be received by the Poles. The instruction also governed the issue of Polish transport by Romanian railways, their guard, and the situation of their vehicles or cars. Romanian authorities from eastern country in Moldavia, not in Bessarabia, demanded checking the trains and stopping all Poles who did not have permits and did not register with the prefecture of the county. On the railways route from Iași, for example, the representative of the railways police could carry out the checks in train to the Focșani rail station, where a headquarters were set up at Focșani Gendarmerie office for the Poles without papers. Focșani became a main sorting center for Poles. Today in Focșani archives there are a lot of documents about Polish refugees. Some aspects about internment, about financial problems, about residence permits. Authorities have taken special measures to solve the problem of Polish refugees. The government of Bucharest offered hospitality, I quote for the documents, as widely as possible to the Polish refugees, but of course, if they are willing to pay the necessary expenses for hosting them, this is a matter for them to solve. Starting September 17, the Romanian government decided to open the country's border for all refugees without requiring official documents, granting asylum and assistance to both civilian and soldiers. The government took the decision that every Polish citizen would receive a food allowance, the Polish minister having a daily allowance for 400 Romanian lei and the former dignitaries of 300 Romanian lei. Until October 15, the nominal register had to be concluded and the money entitlement allocated to the refugees were established. Each person had to receive 100 Romanian lei for each day spent in Romanian territory. A first measure taken by the Minister of Finance was granted refugees for the possibility of changing the Polish zloty in Romanian lei to the National Bank of Romania. Initially, each refugee could change a sum of 300 zlotys at the rate of 20 Romanian lei per 1 zlot. Foreign exchange could only be made on the basis of the passport issued by the Polish consulate from Czernowce or Bucharest. As for military, only the officer could change amount of 300 zlotys, while the lower grades and soldiers were allowed to change only 100 zlotys. Military of all grades and civilian servants received monthly allowance for food and maintenance, 9,000 Romanian lei for generals, 8,000 for senior officer, 6,000 for lower officer, 2,400 for non-commissioned officer. It was equivalent of the sum that the Polish military took in zlotys before the war. This at a time when Polish zlotys were no longer worth anything on the stock exchanges. The Central Polish Committee of Refugees, Central Polski Komitet Uchodźcom, was established under the refugees with the help of Polish community in Romania, founded to Romanian Society of Friends of Poland. Along with 45 other local branches. The first refugees committee was set up in Czernowce with the help of Związek Polaków w Bukowinie, the Polish Union of Bukowina, and the Polish consulate in Czernowce. Regarding the legal status of the troops of a belligerent state, Romania applied principle of international law to the military as refugees, disarming and interning them in order not to continue to struggle. Here is an illustrative example. Commander of the anti-aircraft units, Captain Zygmunt Wasilewski, remembered kissing the land of Poland before handing over to the Romanian border police on 17 September. As far as refugees officials was concerned, they could enjoy the status of refugees as free person leaving the country at any time, but only if they renounced to their official quality. At the time, international regulation on the legal status of refugees was rather precarious, yet the Poles enjoy the protection and the assistance of the Romanian states, and we conclude that the legal treatment according to the refugees complied with the rules of the times. Some aspects about regarding residence permits. Special officers have been created in the centers where the refugees have settled. Every Polish refugee has received a residence permit issued by the county prefecture of the town hall. Each of those institutions has a register in which they had records of the residence permits granted. Location permit was mandatory and did not allow Poles to leave the city of residence. For the reason it was necessary for the interest of Polish to obtain a visa, transit visa from the city police that issue their permits. However, the transit visa were granted only in exceptional circumstances, such family reunification or illness requiring hospitalization. In order to leave Romania, the Poles have to make a request 5 days before and receive a special transit visa. Military could not get such a visa. The train register also recorded Polish vehicles, initially banning their sale to Romanian citizens. Transit visa and motor vehicle permits could only be obtained from the county prefecture. Emigration certificates were offered free to charge to all Poles who could take away all of their mobile wealth or from Poland. Each refugee had to make a written statement requesting to exit visa from Romania and passing the destination country. You can see one of the bottom left of the image. Sorry, but it's not very clear image, but I can read. It's in French, the documents. Déclaration, le sous-signe Michelson Joseph Théodore, réfugié polonais établi provisoirement en Yassi, possédant le permis de location No 304 et libéré par la préfecture de district Yassi, désirant partir au Angleterre, je m'oblige à quitter la Roumanie en 5 jours libres. Following something looks for frame of mind or mood or various problems of the escape recruitment of refugee soldiers. There have been various problems with refugees. The prefecture of Iași, we warned that the mood of the Polish refugees was very bad, and I quote of the document from Iași archives. Some show protest and agitation against the members of the Polish government. Lieutenant Colonel Tadeusz Zakrzenski, a military attaché of the Polish embassy in Bucharest, told to the prefect that, I quote, leaving the territory of Poland by the Marshal constituted a serious error that produced a profoundly unfavorable impression among the Polish army. Roger Raczynski, ambassador of Poland to Bucharest, said, I quote again, the attitude of the Romanian government was perfect and regrets this demonstration. This is in the interest of Romania and the interest of Poland, because above the agitation and individual interests of some people who seem to live in another world, there are Poland's permanent interests. There have also been spontaneous conflict within the Polish community on the territory of Romania. In December, for example, in December 1939, incident occurred between the Poles in a spa resort in Brăila County in a Salt Lake Spa resort, or in the other localities. Romanian authorities subsequently set up a refugee camp for undisciplined Poles and in Bucharest. The authorities were required to prevent these events from being threatened with the expulsion of Poles, causing disturbance from the country. Other Poles, dignitary or soldiers or civilian, were dissatisfied with the legal status attributed to them in Romania. An official of the Polish foreign minister, Władysław Bogusz-Malinowski, declared in September 18 that he felt a deep bitterness when he saw how the Polish soldier was disarmed by their Romanian comrades, mounted in a truck and taken in an unknown direction. And Eugeniusz Kwiatkowski noted in his diary that Romania did not prove to be an ally, disarming the Polish soldiers, expressing regret that he did not choose Hungary for refugees. Other difficulties has been created by the tension between German minority in Bukovina and the Polish minority in Bukovina. After Poland occupation by Nazi Germany, the Poles, I quote from a document from Cherniovtsi archive, hatched an indiscriminated hatred on the Reich, triggered a serious violence against the Germans in Bukovina. About a very well known aspect is related to the fact that the Poles were allowed to leave the territory of Romania. As the Polish Ministry of Internal Affairs worked with the General Inspectorate for Refugees in Romania, on October 4, were registered 49,500 asylum refugees, including 23,000 soldiers. 5 months later, in March 1940, the Romanian authorities informed the International Committee of Red Cross that in Romania there were no more than 6 internment camps for Polish refugees, totaling 9,000 persons. With the authorities' tacit approval, most Polish refugees has gone abroad. Polish refugees have created difficulties for Romania without the work of the Polish committee to recruit refugee soldiers, and they wanted to live in France to form the Polish national army, the Sikorsky Army. As in Romania, there were many soldiers and young people aged between 18 or 40 capable to fight. In May 1940, authorities were urged to prevent these refugees from leaving the country. On this occasion, the refugees from Iași, for example, created problems from Romanian authorities. Civilians and soldiers disappeared after their arrival on their destination. Other soldiers had disappeared from the camps where they were interned. According to a statistic, 74 Polish officers had disarmed from Dragoshan camp, 64 from Korabia, 30 from Govora, 50 from Herculanespa, or 70 from Urzicen camp. Gerhard Stelzer, an advisor to the German legation in Bucharest, noted in his memoirs that Romania violated the law of neutrality, with it allowed Polish refugee soldiers to leave the country to fight against the Reich on other fronts. He also noted that Romania, I quote from Stelzer memoirs, was intentionally giving way to Poles to escape. The French journalist Henri Prost, a witness of the events, wrote that, I quote again, the Romanian government and the police closed their eyes to the departure of Poles who wanted to join to the army of General Sikorsky was organizing in France. For example, Prime Minister Felician Składkowski was authorized to come to Bucharest, where he was taken over by Romanian authorities, who helped him to live in Turkey with a false passport under the name of Vicente Wojcicki. A particular problem was the transit of the Polish treasury on the territory of Romania. In September-November 1940, 1939, this is a mistake, the treasure and other values, such as the crown of Poland, the Wawel castle in Krakow, were shipped to France and made available to the Polish government on exile. The first transportation. On September 10, the Major Henrik Floyer Reichmann was tasked with leading the operation to evacuate the treasury. It's estimated at 70 tons of gold and 360 million zloty arrived in Śniatin on the evening of September 13. On night of 13 to 14, the train crossed the Romanian border. On September 14, supervised by Colonel Ignacy Matuszewski, he transited the country in the direction of Czerniowce, Suceava, Buzău, arriving in the evening next day at the Constanța harbor. Beyond the German pressure that considered the treasure as part of Poland's war capability, the Romanian side stopped several boxes on the territory of the country, arguing it was a guarantee of the Romanian government's debts that the Poles had to pay. The German legation has information about transport and tried to stop in Constanța harbor, but the Germans could not find out the real detail of the operation. On September 15, the Polish treasury was loaded on the British oil tanker Iosan, which the German believed that already left Constanța. On September 17, the ship arrived in Istanbul. From here, he was transported by train to the Beirut and taken by the French ship Émile Bertin, which took him to Toulon harbor. In June 1940, after the France collapse, the Polish treasure was taken by another ship and transported to Senegal at Dakar harbor in French colonial empire in Africa. It was not until April 1944 that the US Navy picked it up and transported it to New York. The second transportation. On September 17, 41 trucks were brought to Czerniowce with boxes, bales, the bags containing gold bullion, heritage coins, objects of great value, and gold works. They constitute part of the cultural treasures of the Wawel Museum, among which the famous Arras goblets. The Wawel treasure was brought to Romania and deposited in Bucharest, but in January 1914, a Romanian ship transported him to Marseille. In June 1940, it was transported to Great Britain and then to Canada. On the time of this transit of gold and the Polish artistic treasure, two feature films were made, both after the screenplays of the Romanian writer and TV presenter Ioan Grigorescu. One is Zloty Pociąg, The Golden Train, Romanian-Polish co-production directed by Bogdan Poręba, and in other films it's Wielkie Wyzwanie, The Great Challenge, which premiered in September 1919, film directed by Romanian director Manole Marcos. The third transportation. On September 19, another trucks arrived in Czerniowce that contained heritage goods and historical archives of the Minister of Defense. The goods were transported to France in November 1939, and the archive deposited in Herculane Spa, being transferred to France in February 1914. 3 tons of gold remained at National Romanian Bank, being ceded to Poland after the war. This represented the guarantee for the amounts that covered the expenses with the Polish refugees. Under these circumstances, Polish Food Commission, an association created to help the Polish population in the occupied territory in New York, switched to Romanian government after the war. They were returned to Poland in 1947 following the trial. Romania, being considered a defeated state after the war, was only partially compensated for sums spent with Polish refugees. Gold was brought back to Poland between 1946 and 1948. Wawel's heritage collection between 1948 and 1961, and the last shipment and archives arrived in Poland only in 1971. In the final part of today's presentations, I will detail some aspects regarding the daily program of the authorities, the various manifestations of the civilian. The picture is from album Rumunski Azil Losi Polaków. The atmosphere of the photograph is different from one we meet today by the war concentration camp. The program of the Polish authority in the refugees camp in Romania was quite permissive. All Polish officers had talks to towns where they were hired, but only accompanied by Romanian officers. Some of the officers in the localities around Bucharest could visit the Bucharest. Colonel Joseph Beck received special treatment. Former Foreign Minister Colonel Joseph Beck was hospitalized in a sanitarium near Sinaia after suffering a nervous breakdown shortly after he arrived in Romania. Later, he was accommodated at the villa of Dobroșești near Snagov Lake with his family, a cabinet director, his personal secretary, the driver, and two maids. A team of 12 officers, non-commissioned officers, and Romanian agents provided security. These privileges were enjoyed by the Polish state official, although Romanian passed through the summer of 1940 through its own drama. For example, Polish President Ignacy Mościcki, living in decades in total secret, was able to receive Polish dignitaries as well as Poland ambassador to Romania, held telephone conversation with congressmen and different centers in the country. The president was visited by Colonel Beck's wives, by various Polish minister officials, as well as by his son, Michael Mościcki, Polish diplomatic representative in Brussels. After his resignation on September 30, Poland's exiled president was taken over by former Polish Senate President Władysław Raczkiewicz in Slenik Moldova Spa. Here, the hotels were made available to guests, the entire resort being closed to tourists. The Polish government, headed by General Słatkowski, was accommodated in Slenik Moldova Spa, where the could get in touch with the Embassy of Poland in Bucharest and the President Ignacy Mościcki. Afterwards, the Polish dignitary were moved to the Herculane Spa in the southwestern part of Romania. The president's strategy was dictated by obvious policy consideration. On the one hand, Poland was defeated in the war with Germany. On the other hand, Romania was in a delicate situation with the German Reich through the hospitality shown to the head of the Poland state. Władysław Raczkiewicz later fled to Paris, the Romanian embassy being no stranger to his move, able to collaborate in secret. Army Chief of Staff Edward Rudź-Śmigły arrived in Craiova on September 19th and was accommodated in the Mihail Palace, Art Nouveau, famous Art Nouveau Palace from Craiova, with 5 senior officers and his family. During his stay in Craiova, the marshal's wife, Marta Rudź, benefiting from the benevolent supervision of the Minister of Interior, conducted intensive political activity by established contact with Polish personality in Romania, moved to Dragoslavele, a small village in Dâmbovița County, in the former residence of the Romanian Patriarch. Śmigły strolled through the village of Dragoslavele. The Marshal could walk on the lake at the Dâmbovița meadows, here in Villa Teodoriade, it's called, lived with a suite of officers. In February 1940, he had the right to paint the courtyard of the villa. Edward Rudź-Śmigły was a painter. attend religion service held by Catholic priests on Edge Sandy, right on the bank of the Vodica. Later, in December 1940, Edward Șmigui passed to Hungary with the help of Romanian military guards led by Romanian Colonel Horea Georgescu, who guarded him. At the camp of Herculanescu was a relaxed program. Former Polish finance minister Eugeniusz Kwiatkowski enjoyed the opportunity to take some walks to the resort alongside other colleagues. Eugeniusz Kwiatkowski hospitalized at the Herculanescu camp following a medical treatment at the sanitarium in Bucharest. He was benefit from several trips in the country, accompanied by Polish diplomatic staff accredited in Romania before September 1939, and then he passed in Turkey with Romanian assistance. Daily life, various manifestation or artistic and cultural manifestation. I will list some of forms of manifestation of the daily life of the refugees. Poles in exile on the territory of Romania state had the right to organize their own public events, but only with the authorization of the Romanian government. Thus, a memorial meal was organized in Bucharest at the Italian church in memory of Marshal Józef Pilsudski, nearby the Italian priest and two Polish prelates. On this occasion, approximately 200 people, including Ambassador Roger Raczynski, Count Poninsky, Colonel Joseph Beck, a military attaché, participated. Not often these moments were used for national propaganda. Thus, Romania, Czesław Miłosz, who has lectured in the capital about Polish interwar literature. Thus, Dr. Gostiński, a Polish language lecturer at the Institute of Southeastern European Studies, made propaganda among Polish refugees to leave to France. On January 1940, the Congress of Polish Refugees in Bucharest was organized and fell under the protection of the American Committee for Help of the Polish Refugees. This event was also attended by Poles in other localities in the country who have been granted 4 days leave. In the winter of 1940-1941, there was classes in Romanian, Polish, and English at Dom Polski in Bucharest, and amateur artist group presented a series of performances. In the center of Câmpul Lung, there is a refugee club, a tailoring shopping, a showmakers, and a barber shop. The cultural life here was completed by the Gazette, The Road to Poland, from which 35 issues appeared, including literary articles, columns, scientific articles. At Caracal there was a driver school for Poles in center of Craiova. Accounting the radio courses was organized. In supporting of the Polish refugees, an important role played the leader of the Polish community in Romania, Titus Cherkawski, who has joined his effort with the ambassador of Poland to Romania, Roger Raczynski. Suggestive in that way is the presence of Titus Cherkawski in the Senate and the Parliament of Romania in the legislature of 1939-1940, thus becoming the only active parliamentarian of Polish origin from all over Europe. The newspaper Kurier Polski w Rumunii, a daily newspaper of the Polish community in Romania, published many articles about the hospitality of the authorities, but especially of civilian population towards the Polish refugees. The daily Kurier Polski w Rumunii spread in Hungary, in Bulgaria, in Yugoslavia, in Italy and France, popularized the solidarity evidence of Poles and Romanians. In an article we will not forget in October 1939, Cherkawski says, I quote, "On the wonderful Romanian land, we meet every day, every step of the way with cordial hospitality. We will never forget the first moments after the crossing the border. Overwhelmed by the terrible misfortune of those people condemned to the hard fate of wandering, we understood from the beginning that we were in the land of France, that the hearts of the Romanians beat in the rhythm of sincere friendship for all Poles, that they leave our misery. The Polish Gazette devoted wide spaces to Polish literature and militant articles to defend national conscience. In her purpose, the light of the print was the Poland is not dead hymn of Józef Wrzbicki, Young Oda, fragments for Polish pilgrim books, My Testament by Juliusz Słowacki, Kościuszko's Funeral by Korel Ujewski, Liberation by Stanisław Wyspiański, or Triumph over the Enemy by Stefan Żeromski. An artistical and cultural manifestation. Writer Kazimiera Iłakowiczówna, established in Cluj in 1939, translates Romanian poets as Alexandru Filipide or Octavian Goga, which he published in Courier Polski. The Poles had their own literature production in Romanian retreat. Bogusław Kuczynski, a Polish refugee, wrote the novel Pobojowisko, Panic Come from the Air, publishing it in Romanian translation in 1914. The novel was recommended by the famous Romanian writer Liviu Rebreanu and the Romanian readers as first novel with roots in the recent German-Polish War. Also in 1914, a printing house in Târgu Jiu, a volume of lyrics was printed, written by Bogusław Lewczycki, unknown author at the time, entitled Viață po Românii, Wind Through Romania. Leskiewicz, a Polish soldier arrived in Târgu Jiu, evoked the martyrdom of his compatriot during the September 1939 campaign. And last but not least, some aspects about Polish School Association, Polski Związek Szkolny. As far as the children of refugees was concerned, 4 schools were organized under the auspices of the Romanian state, 2 in Târgoviște, 1 in Ploiești, and 1 in Brăila, where they teach qualified Polish teachers from the refugees. An important locality was Craiova, where the general school, a gymnasium, and the high school functioned according to the program principle of the interwar Polish educational system. Other schools, which included Polish teachers, subsidized by the Romanian state, opened in 32 different localities, with 3,000 pupils coordinated by the Polish Union of Schools, Polski Związek Szkolny, functioned on the territory of Romania. Even at the level of higher education, the Poles were able to continue their study, having a mentor at Bucharest University in the person of Petre Panaitescu, a famous Slavistic specialist of this time. At the refugee students in Romania enjoy a friendly regime. Students admitted to the capital, in Bucharest, who continued their study in Romania, were able to organize their own events. A canteen also functioned in Bucharest for refugee students. And Polish soldiers enjoy many facilities. They were able to attend meetings at national English, French, and Romanian classes. Under this condition, Romania became, I quote from a document, an oasis of relative peace and stability, able to strengthen the feeling that only a battle was lost, but the fate of the war is not definitively compromised. Some conclusions. Regarding the regime and the status of Polish refugees temporarily in Romania, there have been many debates between Polish and Romanian historians. For example, one of them, it's of the opinion that, as far as dignitary is concerned, one can speak between the terms of political asylum and internal, but as far as the civil population is concerned, it is only possible to discuss asylum with respect for the rules of international law. As far as the military is concerned, the Romanian authorities have complied with the provision of the Fourth Hague Convention of 1907 or the Geneva Convention relative to the treatment of prisoners of war, have not been considered war prisoners or military refugees. The Romanian authorities granted accommodation without taking into account the pressure of Germany. Polish gold facilitated transit and heritage values which don't reach to the hands of Germans. Despite Germans' protest, the state official looked their fingers at thousands of soldiers and officers who managed to flee to the west. The Poles believed that the air did not exert much pressure and expected greater hospitality than the possibility of the host. Romanian cannot thank all Poles. They could not alleviate their pain. They could not restore their hope. But thanks to their help, they survived. They interned the Poles, but not hand them over the Germans. The mood after the refugees was marked by the search for the culprit of military defeat and the assurance of daily life. The Poles found a house in Romania. They could organize, they could set up schools, they could practice their trades. Poles did not know that the war was beginning, was a world war, and Romania would play its own dramatic role. Instead, for Romanians, Polish refugees become the first herald of this war. Cultivating this relationship in the new dimension of the 21st century, it's worth appealing to the legacy of the past that bring two peoples close together. I hope my presentation was not very boring. I hope that in the future I can sustain my second part of this lecture, because in autumn of 1940, the situation was dramatically changed because the King Charles II's regime collapsed. Our new regime was allied by Nazi Germany. On this allied, in this image, we can see the General Ion Antonescu, the Horia Sima, the leader of legionary movement, the King Michael first, the Wilhelm Fabricius, diplomatic representative of Nazi Germany in Romania, and Frank Hansen, the chief of military mission of German mission in Romania, because Romania became an ally with Nazi Germany and the situation of Polish refugees has changed. But these aspects maybe in next my presentation, maybe in the front of students next year. I hope so. Thank you. Dziękuję bardzo.
Dear Professor, thank you a lot. I want to say that your lecture wasn't boring. It's not true. It was very interesting, especially for me was shocked the amount of gold and money which were transferred to Romania. This is incredible. Say the truth, the lecture really and presentation was very, very good. And I want also to say that the second part of the lecture must be this must be good too, and I'm sure that it is fascinating. That's why I'm invite you to participate in to continue to participate in Collegium Carpathicum project, and I invite you after the summer 2021 to make your election, your second part of the election. And I hope that we all have possibility to travel and to meet each other, to make a real election in the traditional understanding of this word. And I hope that you will have time and possibility to go with two parts of your lectures to our students and show them this presentation. Thank you.
Dziękuję bardzo.
Thank you a lot. Thank you for participation.